Obviously, taking the first step is huge. Don't be afraid of making an ugly prototype. Don't be afraid of showing, your colleagues and other people and talk about ideas. I think that's also a big thing is just like actually be somebody who's curious and is willing to go out there and let your curiosity bring you to action and then find inspiration everywhere.
Hello there and welcome. Welcome to another episode of the Business of Better podcast with Dr. John Chuback. Today I have a very renowned guest, a very esteemed guest, and an old friend, someone I worked with for years, uh, Mr. Vikram Ravikumar, who is with Sun Scientific, an incredible medical device company, and I'm going to let him tell his story. So, Vikram, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dr. Chuback. And, you know, I don't know about renowned, but it's definitely my pleasure. And it's great to be your friend. And I love being able to kind of tell the story of Sun Scientific and especially with the business of better, kind of talk about uh, the life of a startup entrepreneur being part of a team and similar to you of trying to come up with new solutions and what it takes and the pain points and the joys. So it's my pleasure.
Well, great. Thank you so much. As I said, we've known each other a long time. We've worked together quite a bit, both clinically and on other entrepreneurial projects. You were our guest at the Vein and Lymphatic Summit 2024 and 2025, and supported that educational platform and helped to bring education to many hundreds of physicians around the United States and around the world. And you're supporting VLS 2025, which is something that I'm personally very appreciative of. Um, Vikram, as you know, the point of our show is to discuss with anyone interested, but I think it's mostly clinicians, physicians, nurses, therapists, etc., people who may be interested in getting involved in entrepreneurship, having their own business, reaching more people. And that's really the purpose of today's show. Of course, I want to talk about your products and how they work and what they do and everything. But tell me, because it's maybe not a unique story, but it's an unusual story about how Sun Scientific started, why it got started, your relationship with its founder, Dr. Ravi Kumar, and I just want to share this so that others out there may be inspired.
Yeah, and it's funny because to me, I found, I think my dad is Dr. Ravi Kumar. I think he'd be a great guest, and I think his story is really the important one to tell, especially from a clinician standpoint. Of he's a vascular surgeon. He's been practicing, since the late '70s when he finished his residency, or when he was started his residency. And he's really someone who's still practicing every day. He's still doing surgery pretty much every day. And his passion for his craft, his passion for his patients, and his passion for solutions. And then also kind of taking the next step really is how Sun Scientific was founded, how I even got involved, and is such an important part of the story. I guess kind of giving my part of it, which is I didn't really have a straight path to entrepreneurship. I had actually studied, I was in a liberal arts college. I'm a nerdy type of person who loves to learn about a lot of things. So I was pre-med for a bit. I kind of was on and off with a lot of different topics. I eventually graduated with an economics and a political science degree, though. But to my bad luck, I graduated in the middle of the Great Recession. And it was a really tough time to try and get a finance job with an economics degree. Um, but it really turns out that bad luck turned out to be a blessing in disguise. And that was really, my sister at the time said, Dad has these patents. I know he's doing something with them. You really should kind of like see if you can help out as you don't have a job and you're painting decks or whatever I was doing that first summer out of college. Um, and my dad's brilliant, demanding vascular surgeon, and he had this tiny little skunkworks in the basement of his clinic. And, it was me, a handful of engineers, and just kind of taking his ideas of, oh, I dropped a hernia mesh when I was doing a ventral hernia repair. I want a little grasper like this. So him taking his kind of his clinical need, his concept, and really you know, trying to iterate and trial by fire and come up with products. And really what we had was a very resource constrained space. Uh, and again, like one of those things that I found in my career, and especially with my pathway to entrepreneurship, is oftentimes like the blessings in disguise. So having in this space where it's very fast paced and it's very demanding, and there are very little resources, uh, that actually turned out to be, all opportunities for me to learn a lot of different aspects of the business, from product development to regulatory to IP to sales, marketing. Eventually, even we our first company was a surgical instrument uh, line, mini lap, where we did percutaneous laparoscopy based on my dad's ventral hernia repair mishap. And then he had the idea of like, well, what happens if I had a little pincer grasper? And then he's like, well, what if I put in a needle? It didn't need a trocar. And that iteration basically allowed us to create a first retractor. And really, where I saw my role was I could start to learn more about laparoscopy. I could learn about, the different competitive ways that people at that time, there was a single incision port that was coming out versus the typical 5 millimeter trocars, and just understanding uh, where our product fit, what products we could start to develop to provide more solutions for those people. Um, and so that was really my kind of start into this. Sun Scientific really was founded on, he had a lot of he's a private practice vascular surgeon. He had a lot of patients who were coming with venous ulcers who were very unhappy, right? So they were coming in week after week and they're not showering. A lot of them were working class people. Yeah, I could think very specifically of a firefighter who was saying like, I need to be back at the station. Why am I coming in for a bandage? He's somebody who could treat himself. And really, for empathy for the patient, being like, well, why can't we come up with a bandage free way for this person to kind of manage himself? Um, so, along the way, I kind of learned what the job was, learned from my peers, figured out what I really like to do, what I love to do, started to hone those skills, and then found mentorship and really worked hard at it. And, I've just been lucky with being surrounded with really talented people who are passionate about the job, passionate about their patients, and now I get to, run Sun Scientific on a day to day, which is, we're really passionate about the patient. We're passionate about coming up with product solutions and thinking holistically for patient centric solutions for chronic venous disease, lymphatic disease, chronic wounds, because those patients, there's many millions of them. And how do we provide dignity in their everyday life?
Yeah, exactly. And, this is something that I can relate to, as you mentioned, being the founder at VitaSupport MD and making the nutraceuticals that we do based on the micronized purified flavonoid fraction. I think that now medicine is our space and healthcare is our space, but I don't think it's any different than any other um, business space out there or industry, in the sense that I think that what you're saying, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong, is that you have to have someone who's involved, who's working in that space every day, and who's trying to provide the best service, the best care in our case, the best product in other cases, whatever the case may be, so that their customer, whether it's a patient in our case, or whether it's a customer in a hardware store or a pizzeria or whatever it might be, is having the most positive experience, getting the most value, um, and having the least number of pain points in moving through that system. And so there has to be somebody with experience in working in the system who says, hey, I think we could do this better. Hey, I don't like the way this is. I wish there were a better way to do this. I wish, quote unquote, they would make one of these and along those lines. And then I think those of us who are entrepreneurs say, well, rather than keep waiting and waiting and crossing my fingers and hoping that somebody else will do it, maybe I'll just get started on that project myself and see how it goes. And then the first step leads to the second step and so on. And it sounds like that's been very much your father's experience and your own and the team that you've built around me,
You know,
or around you, I should
yeah.
say.
No, I mean, Dr. Chuback, I think you nailed it. Which is really being solution obsessed is really critical. And um, it's funny because like lately I've really been getting into finding mentorship beyond just my peers and beyond just the people within my orbit, which is so I'm listening to a lot of biographies and memoirs of entrepreneurs and key and business people. A couple of them are the one that I think that everybody. So the Steve Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson. I'm just finished the Phil Knight memoir, Shoe Dog, the founder of Nike, and just like kind of seeing how the people who have built the brands and the companies and the innovation houses that I really respect, how they view things, and it is uh, being solution obsessed and really not just trying to build a profitable business, but trying to actually improve lives, trying to improve the pain points are things that I think really good businesses and lasting businesses do and good entrepreneurs do. And who better than somebody who experiences the points themselves, who is creative, right? And that's really where I think so many different physicians, clinicians, they see the pain points. The average person will have an idea for a moment and kind of move on. But I think there are the people like you, like people like my dad, who say, "Well, I'm going to do. I'm fed up of it. I'm going to take that next step." I've been really fortunate to kind of be around that, and then to start to take that into myself and start to drive it myself now as well. So I think you're right that you know the clinician themselves are probably better suited than a salesperson in terms of really identifying where value can be created.
Yeah. And many times, though, it's not going to be the physician who has the time, the energy, the bandwidth, in some cases, even the finances, in many cases, the finances to start something by themselves. And that's why I think your father was very forward thinking in building a team around him. It sounds like he had some engineers and some other folks there before you even got involved. And I think you used the term, the skunk lab that he had down in the basement. I think you do have to sort of have a laboratory of sorts, even if that laboratory is solely in your mind, where you're being imaginative and creative and thinking, what if we did this? What if we did that? I wonder if this would work and that would work. But eventually, what advice can you give to someone who's out there, let's say, who's got an idea in his or her head and they're thinking, I'd like to, I like to use the word transmute. I'd like to transmute this idea from the realm of mental energy in my mind and my creative imagination and transmute it into the physical realm and bring a real product to market or to create a real business that provides service. What advice can you give based on your personal experience? How does somebody go from a concept to at least the first step of reality and a actually functioning business model?
Yeah. So I can give some background. So when I joined, there was one engineer and a secretary in the basement of Sun Scientific or Mini Lab at the time. And even before that, I'll kind of give to my dad's origin story where um, he was drawing things on napkins and coming up with that. And, there is a trade show at the Javits Center every year that's medical device manufacturers, NDNM. And he used to walk around. He found a supplier in Connecticut, and between cases, he would drive there, and he would pay an outsourced engineer whatever, couple $100 an hour to at least like start to put together with different pieces of other medical devices or different pieces of metal a prototype. And I think really allowing the creative side of I know growing up, I grew up with endo GIA clipifiers and broken up pieces of medical devices kind of around the house. So, just that kind of that laboratory of yourself of just finding pieces and cutting out, uh, you know, for us, we love to prototype and just being okay um, with coming up with a very ugly concept first, finding people and taking it stepwise of, okay, I'm going to do 5 hours of prototyping just to get it to the next step. Okay, I'm going to do a provisional patent with a patent attorney, which actually a provisional patent is. So, there's some of the tricks and tips that I've learned along the way, like a provisional patent, for example. It's not, it costs 200 something dollars. You could file it yourself. It will not, but it at least protects and gives you a date for you, gives you another year to go file a real patent with a patent attorney. But at least it gives you some protection until that next step. So, I think it's one of those, the kind of, I can imagine like the entrepreneur's handbook and like what are kind of some secret weapons. And I think part of it is make an ugly prototype, start to think about like protecting your idea, try to figure out like, at least like from an initial smaller cost, who can be a helpful person. Do you need an accountant, or do you need like an engineer? What kind of depending on the business model you're doing, right? Who can kind of help you and take it one step at a time, because that's what I've really seen here is that I came in probably step 2 or 3, um, or to me it looks like step 2 or 3, probably step 200 or 300, right? uh
Right.
but how many different steps we've taken from there till now. So it's just one step at a time.
Yeah. Well, my older son works with us full time now in the company after 10 years that we're in business, and he went to law school. He practiced as an attorney for a couple of years. My younger son has worked in the company part time and is involved in other entrepreneurial subject. He also went to law school, but it's something again that they came to much later after, as you said, it might seem like step 2 or 3, but it's step 200 or 300 to get to where you're bringing other people on. And there are just some, I think, fundamental nuts and bolts pieces that folks who don't have any experience in business or entrepreneurship have to um, get in place early that I'm sure your father did and you probably helped him with later. As you said, patent protection, if you're making a device, for example, or product, might be something that you need to do even in a provisional point of view. Um, but setting up a company, creating an LLC, registering a name with the state, you might need a website, you might need a logo, you might want to trademark a name. I mean, all of these little, very, very practical, fundamental steps are necessary parts of having a real business, I think. I mean, the ideas and the imaginative and creative part, especially for those of us who are wired that way by nature, that kinds that kind of thing comes fairly easily. And we have a proclivity for that. I smile and I laugh when I think of your father, drawing on napkins and
Yeah.
things. I have so many napkins and notebooks and things filled with sketches and drawings. But then those of us who are those creative types do need to have more grounded, practical people with feet on the ground who say, yeah, that's okay, but we're going to need an insurance
Yeah.
policy, right? If we're going to start selling a dietary supplement for people to ingest, we're going to need to be covered if, God forbid, somebody has some sort of problem or makes some sort of claim. So there are all of those practical matters to consider. But fortunately, I think we live in a golden age where so many of those things, as you said, could be done very inexpensively, in many cases by yourself,
Hmm.
online, filling out forms and things like that. And but those are some of the practical pieces that also have to be put in place.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I really have been at the cross section of creativity and practicality. And that's, I mean, so much of the medical device, you think about a medical device startup, that's what it is, right? You need to have the imagination to come up with something new. It needs to be new enough so that you can, it's patentable, from a practical standpoint. It's patentable, it's unique. You but also it's unique enough that it solves a solution, right? Because these are all product solution products. That nothing we do is to say, oh, we're going to do that. We're going to do it necessarily cheaper. What we want to do is we want to do it to improve care, improve, pain points, whether it's for a surgeon or for a patient, and then also have it be cost effective. Um, and so you're combining the innovation, creativity, but then, okay, like, can we manufacture it? Can we get it cleared by the FDA? Can we get it patented? Can we uh, build, that's really where I think the healthcare innovation comes together, where um, solutions are so important, new products are so important, but also the other side of it, the access is one of those things where, like, the day in, day out of, like, uh, you know, the boring business side of it really is critical for long-term adoption, for long-term success. It is also, starting to think of both halves, the left brain, right brain, um, being creative, but also making it so it's functional, and that you can actually get it out there so that people can use it and it can improve lives and uh, and and outcomes.
Yeah, there are so many pieces to that puzzle, and you touched on a number of them. Um, manufacturing being one of them. One of the things you touched on, Vikram, that you might have insights into that I'd like you to share if you do. I'm quite certain that you do. You mentioned this idea of a medical device being FDA cleared. And this is something that I know quite a bit about because as a nutraceutical manufacturer at Vitasupport MD, um, nutraceuticals, for example, dietary supplements in the United States are not FDA approved. But for example, our company manufactures our products in the United States in an FDA registered facility. So there are a lot of these terminologies that sound similar, but they're not exactly the same. And there's overlap. So maybe you can describe, let's say somebody out there has a device in mind who wants to bring it to market, the difference between, let's say, something which is FDA approved and something like a medical device which is FDA cleared.
No, um, I'm gonna, my Alan, my head of regulatory, will kick me for not remembering the CFR, the actual number of the regulatory for the federal registry. But the FDA for medical devices has basically three classifications: class one, two, and three. And really, it's stratified by risk. And so we've done products in class one and class two, which is really kind of low risk products, which are registered as a class one. And that's something, a bandage or a dressing or something that really is sitting on the outside of the skin. It's not going in the body. It doesn't involve electricity. Something that has very low risk of harming the patient is, a class one device. You develop the product. You have your documentation on file per all the FDA regulations. You work with an FDA registered facility. So there's a lot of quality system already that needs to be in place. And the FDA will come in and audit your quality system on the back end. A class two is really that is the next stage, and that's more like a surgical instrument that's not implantable. And that's, Minilab, we had 10 what we call 510Ks, and those are basically you're getting a clearance, you're submitting documentation to the FDA in advance, but it's substantial equivalence. So it's basically saying something else in the market which it does the same type of thing relatively, and has been in the market for a while and has been proven safe and effective. We're providing the documentation from reliability testing, sterility testing, et cetera, to show that this has substantial equivalence in terms of risk profile. And then you get a clearance for that. So a 510K is basically a clearance. And then oftentimes, that third level class three is an approval. And that's a much more involved aspect. And that's something that's more implantable or has a high risk of severe injury or death to the patient. And that's often where you need to provide a plan to the FDA even before you submit your approval requirements. So you're going to have to do clinical trials on multiple levels beyond just saying this is as safe and effective as other products in a similar category.
Right. This might be something like I'm just off the top of my head as a cardiac surgeon thinking maybe like an implantable, defibrillator or
Exactly. Yeah.
something that's going to apply an electrical shock to the patient's
Yeah.
heart and monitor their rhythm and potentially is a life-saving device, but if it malfunctions, could kill somebody.
Exactly.
And so that's a totally different level of subject matter. And as you say, in a class one, many times people are surprised to find out that it's m- m- so much of this work is really done on the honor method. In other words, the the business owner, the manufacturer needs to make themselves aware of the law and the guidelines and what the FDA requires, and then abide by those requirements and put all your ducks in a row. But it's not necessarily that somebody's ever coming out to actually check on that unless you were to have, let's say, a problem, there were complaints, there was an audit, etc. And because when you look at a country the size of the United States and the number of people and the number of the ideas and the number of, let's say, devices coming out, it would just be absolutely impossible to look at every single one of those. So it's very interesting for newcomers
Hmm.
to understand that so much of it is done very much on an ethical and honor system that ignorance of the law is not a defense. So if you screw it up, you could be wildly exposed down the line. But we are supposed to go to the guidelines, and hopefully, as we get more established with the assistance of qualified attorneys and so on and so forth, to look at those guidelines and make sure that all of our ducks are in a row.
Yeah. No. Exactly. So, especially for the FDA, the key thing that they do, what even without a safety inspection, they'll do regular audits. Different. That we have a field office 10 miles away from here, and so like they just have they have their list and it pops up, and they'll do a spot inspection and just say, okay, show me your quality system, show me your design history files for these products, and they do spot inspections every once in a while on your quality system. But so much, especially for a class one where you're not pre-submitting, is that you have a quality system that matches what the FDA requirements are and that documentation is on file. And until you get audited, really a lot of that is in your own personal files. Uh, One thing that we do and is, we work with outside auditing agencies. So like BSI is ours. So we have our ISO 13485, which is the international standards of medical device manufacturers. And we have a third party agency that we do semi-annual audits. And so they really do everything to a fine tooth comb to make sure we're doing to standards beyond just the FDA, as well as to European standards. Um, and not, looking at the quality systems, but also looking at our technical files, our testing, et cetera. Again, it's so funny because like you think the creativity side lends its way to this business side of you know me working my R&D focused, prototype focused people alongside my quality assurance and regulatory focused people, and making sure there's proper cross collaboration as we're developing, iterating, and coming out with new products.
Yeah. Now, are you doing your at Sun Scientific, are you doing your own manufacturing in-house?
So it depending on the product. I think one of the things that we do all the time is design, develop our own products. We're the manufacturer of record for all of our products, but sometimes we have to use contract manufacturing. Like every even the major companies out there, they'll use you want to find a factory that is. FDA registered and has the capabilities and the expertise in the specific manufacturing process of that specific product. Um, but we do have all the engineering is done here, all the development is done here. We have a prototype lab. We do some final assembly, kitting, testing, warehouse distribution in our office here. We've done some manufacturing in the past, but it's really mixed depending on the product.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, newcomers would find very interesting to know that even big companies use contract manufacturers. I
Hmm.
mean, even let's say if you look at the big three, the big automobile companies, people are under the, I think, wild misconception that those companies make every part, for example, that goes into an automobile, where generally speaking, it's probably mostly drivetrain, engine
Yeah,
and transmission and things like that. And many of the other, even they may be designed by, let's say, Ford Motor Company, in terms of how they should look and function, et cetera. But they use innumerable outside third-party contractors to create who knows what tail lights and the horn and radio systems and interfaces and digital interfaces and all of this kind of the Apple CarPlay, for
exactly. Yeah,
example, and especially as cars have become more and more
modular. Yeah, they're
yeah,
interconnected and
modular
modular.
and
Yeah, yeah,
sophisticated, right. So those are all very, very interesting points. Tell us a little bit now about your products themselves, and what you're offering and what they're meant to do, and how you and your dad and your whole team have created a better mousetrap, so to speak.
yeah. So Sun Scientific, again, we're focused on improving care for the patients with venous disease, lymphatic disease, and chronic wound. And, one of the things that we do is really look at the patient holistically and see, you know, uh, phlebo lymphedema of static compression and advanced pump compression and wound care. Oftentimes, those patients had a very disjointed experience. And what we're doing is looking to create a holistic set of products that work really well for patients to self manage their chronic swelling, their advanced swelling disease, or their chronic wounds. So we have compression products, we have wound care products. Our kind of main compression products, a product called AeroWrap. And the idea is it is an easy product to apply, so it's Velcro on, and it's something that we can apply highly accurate and effective compression. So it's Velcro on, it's very low profile, it's very lightweight, it's flexible, but also we can actually attach a little hand pump that has calibrated safety valves. So the patient or the doctor or any unskilled caregiver can set it to the appropriate compression level, and it automatically, once they fill it up, will set to that amount, and then they can actually be walking around with comfortable, highly effective compression that also happens to be highly inelastic. So it actually helps squeeze the calf muscle with ambulation into the deep venous lymphatics. You get a really good ejection velocity out of the fluid in the inside the leg. And what we can do is we can actually manage the chronic swelling there. Um, we've also made it very modular. So now all of a sudden we can take that device and we can attach a portable intermittent pump, and they can get ambulatory or mobile, at least, lymphedema compression. And now, the entire wound care side of thing is we have a compression garment that can be removed, uh, viewed, reattached. And now we've come up with a whole series of dressings where all of a sudden we're not relying on bandaging. We're coming up with anatomical shapes where patients, caregivers, clinicians can all of a sudden go and, like our Exucare products, I like to call it the leg diaper, because it basically wraps around the leg. They peel some tabs. It absorbs the drainage, pulls it in. They can put air wrap around it, and all of a sudden we're able to kind of shift that chronic venous patient. That firefighter I talked about. Instead of having to come into a clinic for weekly or multi times a week Uniboot or multi-layer bandage changes, they all of a sudden can now live a life of dignity. They can remove it, shower, reapply compression, have good drainage management, have effective compression that they know is safe and accurate. And so, that's really what we're looking to do is be a dignity provider, a service provider to clinicians, and a great resource to patients as they manage their long-term chronic diseases.
Yeah, and these are great devices which I've used obviously extensively myself in my practice over the years. And you talk about dignity, which is a huge part of it, and also autonomy, independence, right, mobility, that patients take ownership of their life again and aren't constantly in and out of the doctor's office or the wound care center for dressing changes, et cetera, or even having to wait at home for visiting nursing and things like that. I mean, it's a tremendous advantage, and I think that that's where our young entrepreneurs and not so young entrepreneurs, there are physicians and clinicians my age and older who have been walking around with a great idea for 30 years in their head, or after 30 years of practice, a great idea hit them suddenly and say, wow, this would be amazing to bring to market and to make happen. Um, so you're always looking for a better way of doing things, as we like to say, a better mousetrap, um, something that's affordable, something that's accessible, something that everyone can use, hopefully. I mean, under ideal circumstances, that would be your model, something that is attainable, affordable, that could be applied to all kinds of people, if not everybody, and something that's superior to what already existed. And I know I like the fact that in our discussion today, you use the word iteration. It's not a word that everybody knows, but for those of us who are inventors and developers and so forth, we certainly get it. It just simply means one version after another version after another version, whether that's the Volkswagen Beetle that's been made for 50 years or the Porsche 911 that's been made for 50 years. It's the same car fundamentally, but those engineers are constantly trying to make it just a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit superior to the previous design, never the same design twice. What the Japanese, I think, business people like to call Kaizen, this never ending process of trying to make things a little bit better. And I know that that's what you and the good people over at Sun Scientific have been doing for many years now.
Thank you. Yeah, it's what drives us, and not to sit on our laurels, because that's when innovation dies, right? That's where the pain points don't get addressed, and that's where we're looking to really make a dent in the universe, so to say, which is you know our efforts can lead to somebody's life improving a little bit. Our efforts of saying, okay, well, can we get a little bit thinner fabric so that this somebody can put the product on, and with their standard, their business suit or a khakis, and not feel as though that they're getting judged by people as they're walking down the street, unlike a big bandage where it's bulky and they have to wear a Crocs, and clearly they look sick. I think that's where kind of the development side really comes in, about like pushing it every day and it to try and have better outcomes and better product, and be useful to the industry.
Yeah, I think that's another very, very important point you bring out. The usefulness or the usability. In other words, you might have a perfect device, but if the patient can't practically use it in day-to-day life, if they can't put their shoe on, for example, which has become, which has always been a major problem. You could put some big, bulky, terrific bandage, but if the patient then can't put their shoe on and go to work, and then they stay stuck at home and immobilized and potentially have a major financial crisis in their life or in their household, then that design isn't doing you any good. So there has to be a practical, usable nature to it as well. And that's why sometimes the creative types are too focused on their own perfect idea and less focused on how is a real person going to apply this or utilize this in the real world, and sometimes there has to be a little give and take in that process.
No, I think you absolutely, where usability and practicality, I think, are fundamental to our DNA. Um, and I think the other side of it, which is the business side of it, the access. Uh, I think, unfortunately, or just I don't even, it is just, the reality is that access, though, also plays a very big part of, I say, a successful business or a successful product or a good product. Um, and that's one thing I think has really changed for Sun Scientific, especially with our compression products, where recently there's been new coverage. There was a congressional act that got passed called the Lymphedema Treatment Act, and it gave patients at all stages of lymphedema access to compression therapy. It has made it a lot easier for clinicians to identify, diagnose, and for patients to get their needed compression covered by their insurance benefits. Um, and so it really has made it so that the access of our products is much quicker and with a lot less pain point and a lot less financial burden on the patient. Because I can't tell you how many times, especially venous ulcer patients, right? From a socioeconomic standpoint, it's often people who can afford to miss work the least or can afford a new product the least. And so often we would get, the response, "Oh, I love your product, but how is it paid for?" And without having a simple answer there, we struggle to really get change how it's crazy enough that a $6 bandage uh, to me is much more expensive than, let's say, $150 compression garment that's reusable, because that $6 bandage is changed multiple times a week. It takes 20, 30, 40 minutes of multiple clinician, an MA, a doctor, a nurse, whoever it is, the patient missing work driving there, right? So the opportunity cost, the overall cost of that low cost disposable uh, was so much greater than an individual, higher quality garment. But until the Lymphedema Treatment Act was in place, people really looked at that more expensive global bandage as being less expensive and the way to go. So I think really that's one of the things where having a great product and having it be usable by the people also kind of lends its way to like giving people the channel access and the ability to get the product as well.
Yeah, w as we sort of come to the end of our time here together, I do have 1 or 2 more practical questions. The fir the first subject we've touched on, and I think we've given people a good insight into, how do I go from having an idea in my head to an object in my hand, whether it's a dietary supplement, an AeroWrap bandage system, a compression system, etc. Whatever the case may be, again, your widget, your so-called better mousetrap. Vikram, there's another important question that I want to bring out for our viewers. It's a big question, but do your best with it. So now I've gone from this image in my head to this item in my hand. That's a tremendous, tremendous process to go from 0 to 1, as they say. Now that I have it, what do I do to get it out there and sell it and have somebody purchase it
Hmm.
and develop some, revenue
Yeah.
and hopefully, at some point, make some profits so that we can keep going and stay in business?
Yeah. It really, so there's different way. I mean, the commercialization of the product, I know, I've lived it is complex and it's long. We've done a few different things. So at times we've worked with some of these smaller distributors. I mean, well, the first thing I would do is uh, get it in front of friendlies, get it in front of people that you respect and are from the industry. So if you're a clinician, reach out to your colleagues and say, "Hey, I have a prototype I want to show you." Get some feedback from your colleagues, get some insight from people who really can give good feedback. That's the first thing. Now,
It's great advice, really good advice, because the last thing you wanna do is have your perfect device get to the marketplace, and then for the first time, hear from all of your qualified, experienced colleagues 115 reasons why it's terrible, it's got errors, it's got mistakes, and the worst part is that you might agree with 75 of those reasons
yeah.
once you have a sounding board
Mhm.
to kinda give you another perspective.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important is to kind of flush out those things and to kind of also it'll help you understand what is the value of it. There are sometimes you don't realize a use case or a value of a product until you really get it out there with really qualified opinion leaders. Um, I think at that point, you know, we've done multiple things where we've worked with smaller distributors, kind of these 1099, they call them the 1099s, the independent reps that may not work for a big company, but they work for maybe a regional place. We've worked where we kind of say, hey, like for commission or give you a little bit of, a stipend plus commission, help us start to market this product. We've gone to the big medical device company. So our first company, Minilab, it actually started with a Japanese distributor, Ituchu. But then eventually, very quickly, we actually signed a deal with Stryker and their endoscopy division. And all of a sudden, we had, hundreds of highly qualified salespeople. And it was part of their, we had an exclusive worldwide distribution with them. And all of a sudden, that channel access to kind of to get that first product, and eventually we launched 25 products through that distribution agreement with them. Was to me, it was a great learning experience, but also that the sales effort and the marketing effort is very expensive. It's difficult, and sometimes you give up a lot to work with the big companies, and it really just depends on how much you're willing to give and how invested they'll be. And that's really, I think those are key decision making points. I think Sun Scientific, what we've had is, what we found is that we believed in our value. We saw the value so much. We couldn't get the big companies to really buy in on the vision and investing in, so much of the wound care world was invested in these high flying skin grafts and really advanced wound care products that were uh, really high revenue drivers. But what we saw didn't change the lives of so many people. And we couldn't get a big company to really buy off on our vision. And so in that case, Sun Scientific, we've built the distribution and the sales force, and we've been building it ourselves. And that's really because we believe in the mission. And we're saying, we're going to invest our own time, effort, and money, uh, even when the big guys out there, didn't see the value there. So I think it's, you have to try and find, to us is like, we want our products to as many people as possible to improve the lives of as many people. And if that means partnering with a big company, great. In this case, it means that we've had to do it ourselves, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, great. And that's the experience that I've had at Vitasport MD too, building the marketing and distribution and sales force and everything internally, which takes time and uh, commitment and vision. There's no question. When you talk about these 1099 independent 1099 distributors for listeners who might be interested, how would you go about finding somebody like that or a group of folks like that?
One of the best reference points are from customers and colleagues, the actual clinicians, being asking them like, do you have a sales rep that you think is highly reputable? Is there somebody that you like working with? And then getting their contact information and just understand, okay, do you work for the big company or do you have your own kind? Are you a subcontractor to a big company? And are you, can I show you this product? Are you interested in this product? Do you have a reference for somebody? And really just to me, always the clinic first, that the surgeon first or the clinician first, to get that reference point. uh, they have high expectations. They know who is good, who is qualified, and then kind of getting reference there. That's been a really effective way for us to try and find people who are uh, can effectively, represent our products.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think surprisingly, it's not something I knew early on. I had a different perspective, but I was always under the assumption that these reps have an exclusive contract with the company that they're coming to see me about. And it turns out there's a fair number of them who actually are independent contractors who are sort of hired guns, and they can even work for some of the big companies sometimes, but they don't have an exclusivity clause, and they can, especially if it's something that makes sense as a good add-on.
Mm-hmm.
They'll say, listen, I'm already bringing this product in this realm, and this seems to fit the overall clinical, circumstance. So be an easy thing for me to kind of mention and talk about while I'm there.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's more value to for the time of the clinician. It's more value for the rep when they're coming in, and one of the things that we've kind of really found is that, obviously they're not independent reps, but like Varithena, for example, there are so many patients who get Varithena where, they have chronic venous disease, but they have a lymphatic element of their disease state. And so that's where, all of a sudden we could talk about AeroWrap and that, okay, those patients during the consultation, you could start for the appropriate ones that have a lymphatic element, we can start the process to get them compression as well. And so, the way, even though that's not our product, obviously it's at Boston Scientific, we can kind of see like, okay, there is a collaboration, either not with the rep per se, but at least with that treatment for the clinicians, and really kind of understanding there are lots of circumstances like that where value, goes both ways.
Exactly. Well, Vikram, we've come to the end of our time together. It always goes too fast, and you and I have had many of these interviews together. But I would like to extend, as you know, I've done this off air, but I'll do it on air, uh, a very cordial invitation to your father, Dr. Ravi Kumar, to join us on the program and talk about his experience and how he became an entrepreneur and how he started Sun Scientific. And maybe he'll bring some of, we'll be lucky enough, he'll bring some of those old cocktail napkins and things with the drawings to show us where it all where it all started. But I always say what you see in your hand, what you're holding in your hand, always was first existing in somebody's creative imagination as a vision in their mind. And it's an extraordinary process that we as human beings are fortunate to have and to experience. So I'd love to have your dad on the show at any time. So please let us know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. My step one or two is his step, 100, 200. So he can give you those.
I'd love it.
Yeah.
I'd love to go right back to step one. The first day he said,
Yeah.
"Damn, I can't believe I just dropped that mesh on the floor," and how it went from there. So um, I'll let you get the last word. Your last bit of advice for somebody out there who's just itching to start their own company, become an entrepreneur, and find a way to reach more people outside of the reach of their own two hands. Any advice you have in closing?
Um, I think obviously taking the first step is huge. Don't be afraid of making an ugly prototype. Don't be afraid of showing, your colleagues and other people and talk about ideas. I think that's also a big thing is just like actually be somebody who's curious and is willing to go out there and take let your curiosity bring you to action. And then find inspiration everywhere. So that's one of the things that for us is we get inspired by our colleagues, we get inspired by the patients, by the surgeons, the clinicians, and yeah.
Yeah, it's great advice, and you touched on a concept there that's something essential to success and personal development, which is don't let fear conquer you. It's normal to experience fear and trepidation and a certain degree of apprehension and hesitancy. When you want to start something, you might have to spend some money, you might have to write a check, you might have to make an investment. But most importantly, as Vikram points out, you might have to tell somebody your idea. And when you go to do that, you might be concerned that they might say, "What a stupid idea," or "Who thought of that?" or "Are you crazy?" or "Are you nuts?" or "That's never going to work," or "Don't waste your money," or uh, anything along those lines, because the human mind can generate in its own imagination, just like it can imagine a great product. It can also imagine a lot of bad outcomes, embarrassment, humiliation, etc. And too often, that stops us dead in our tracks long before we ever get started. So at least give yourself that opportunity to take that first step, as Vikram said, and get started. And if people laugh at you, you can laugh along with them, and maybe it's good feedback, and maybe you'll make your idea or service a little bit better, or maybe you'll ignore them, or whatever will happen, but at least you've started the process. So with that, I'd like to say, Vikram Ravikumar, thank you so much, as always, for your friendship and your support and participating on the Business of Better podcast with Dr. John Chuback. And we hope to see you again sometime very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Shuback.